Did you know that Elon Musk has co-founded 7 companies? This includes Tesla as well as SpaceX. Did you know that in 2020, Elon Musk did not even make it to the top 10 richest people's list in Forbes? And did you know in 2024, he is the richest man in the world with a net worth of $275 billion. Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Calculus. I'm your host Anil Padmanabhan. In the weeks since Donald Trump pulled off an audacious win in the US presidential elections, there's one development which is catching everyone's attention. This is the rise of Elon Musk's influence in the incoming Trump administration. As a very successful businessman, with a proven penchant for disruption and forcing tough bargains, Elon Musk is a wild card in Donald Trump's cabinet. India too could be affected. Tesla, which manufactures electric vehicles, and Starlink, which provides communications using satellites, are both queued up to invest in India, but on Musk's terms. So far, India has not blinked. Will Musk's newfound influence in the Trump cabinet tilt the scales? To answer this, I spoke to Pradeep Mehta. He is the Secretary General of CUTS. But before that, here are 6 reasons why the world should sit up and take note of Elon Musk's growing influence in Trump 2.0.
6 reasons why the world should sit up and take note of Elon Musk's influence in Trump 2.0. Elon Musk backs Donald Trump as president and commits to over $100 million in campaign funds. After Trump's victory, Musk joins a phone call with Ukraine President Zelensky. Elon Musk is central to President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks and is happy to be called the first buddy. Elon Musk is to join Trump administration, appointed co-head of the proposed Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk has an unprecedented influence, and supporting that argument is Minton Meadows, the editor-in-chief of The Economist on National Public Radio. The role that Elon Musk is playing in this transition of President Trump is extraordinary. He seems to be in so many meetings. I have been racking my brains to try and come up with the historical precedent for such kind of extraordinary influence of one individual. An article on the Wall Street Journal read, "The two men have been inseparable over the past week at Mar-a-Lago, where the Tesla chief executive has become such a fixture that Trump has given him his own walk-on song to play when he enters the dining room." David Bowie's Space Oddity. 3 firms, Starlink, Tesla and X, owned and controlled by Elon Musk, are either present in India or looking to enter, and Musk has been demanding special treatment.
I began by asking Pradeep whether he agreed that Elon Musk is the X factor in the incoming Trump cabinet.
See, he's clearly what I would remember an American expression about being what is a term called bagger. If you go back to his history, as I said, he could create an upset in the automobile industry, a saturated automobile industry, which only shows that he knows how to make the best out of a bad situation as well. Now, what he did with Trump was that probably his conviction of supporting Trump as the best thing to do. And he was proven right, because the first time for a long time that the president has received a popular vote also. Majority of the popular vote, which has happened rarely. If you remember, George Bush also never got a popular vote. For example, the junior, I don't know about the senior. But the fact is that he has ingratiated himself with Trump, and Trump has given him this responsibility of government efficiency. So he's going to be, I would say, he would be turning many things on its head, things which were not even imagined would happen.
Pradeep, Musk is primarily a businessman. And yes, he's now part of the administration, but he has massive business interests globally. We know of Tesla, we know of Starlink, we know of his role in the startup, AI startup which he has set up. So, two questions here. One, will there be a conflict of interest given his business interests and his political status? Second, how does this play out with respect to India? Because both Starlink and Tesla are potential investments in India, and they are already stirring trouble, especially in Starlink with the resident players, which is Geo and Airtel.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little worrisome. If you remember, Elon Musk was scheduled to come and meet Narendra Modi. He had an appointment to discuss setting up a Tesla factory here. And at the last minute, he cancels it. And as if a slap in the face, which Modi is not going to forget, he goes to China and signs the same deal. Especially in times when people are pulling out of China. And and Trump again is very anti-China. So it's all very, very puzzling as to how it will sort of pan out in the times to come. Secondly, if he's going to pick up a fight with the Ambanis here, I don't think it's going to be easy that he'll get a walkover in terms of the satellite, the space link as such, the Starlink. So that we have to see as to how it pans out. But these are not going to be easy things. Let me tell you that. And I don't, because as I said, I mean, what he did was absolutely unpardonable. Having made an appointment with the Prime Minister, he doesn't show up and goes to China and signs the same deal. Especially when people are pulling out of China. There are so many investors who are pulling out of China, going to India, Vietnam, Cambodia, and or what have you. In this situation, it was quite, And mind you, in China, there are a lot of electrical vehicles which are very successful, globally successful. So it is again a very tough market.
See, Pradeep, one factor here is that, like I mentioned to you, he is part of the administration and he's framing all his global investments in the MAGA, Make America Great Again context. And we know from precedents that this resonates with President Trump. If you recall, with the issue of Harley Davidson, it became a sticking point between India and the US up to a certain point, and it was eventually resolved. But President Trump threw in a lot of social capital here. So, which is why I want to know that do you think in the case of Starlink, his presence in the administration could tip the scales in the favor of Starlink vis-a-vis domestic players?
It can. This is what I'm saying. I'm a little worried about the outfall of and naturally Trump's business interests will be a guiding factor, will be an important influencer, and that we have seen in all the past interaction between the U.S. government and the Indian government, that business interests have always remained high, and particularly in the U.S. where businesses are very big funders, including Musk, for example, has funded millions of dollars to Trump, and he would then expect a quid pro quo out of what he has done for him during the election campaign. Now, where would be the interesting aspect, Anil, would be in future as to where do we draw the red line, or do we have a yellow line and a green line? That is what the government has to think about. Government has to start thinking about it now. Give you one example. Trump has even called India a tariff king. Mind you, our average tariffs are 17%. They're not so high, average tariffs. On some tariff lines, for example, automobiles, we do have high tariffs. But that is to protect our own domestic economy. Even the US is doing the same thing. Even much before Biden also. They have also been having, variable tariff lines.
Given the unpredictability factor in Trump 2.0, I was curious to know as to how India should prepare to deal with the new administration.
There are a lot of things which we do not know as to how they will pan out. But fortunately, we have a very smart foreign minister, Jaishankar, who's very wise, very intelligent, very diligent, who will be a good guide to the government, including other ministers. Among other ministers who are smart to understand geopolitics and geoeconomics is Hardeep Puri, for example. And if Modi is going to go by their advice, then things might be better, but not with some of the other ministers who I don't wish to name, who are not smart geoeconomically or geopolitically. But at least these two ministers that I know, and others also, they're quite good. So we are in safe hands as far as the administration is concerned in order to prepare ourselves for a potential Trump administration which might be disruptive for us also. It can be disruptive. It will be disruptive, I can say that. Because there are a lot of things they do without even forethought as to, what would be the outcome of this kind of thing. They're not diplomats as such, unlike, the other administration, who were fairly diplomatic in the sense that they would consult their security and diplomatic personnel before taking any step like this. But quite often, many of these measures are announced off the cuff. So what is it that we need to do our government is to be prepared to set up a core group of ministers which is going to be kind of a think tank to deal with the Trump administration. But not because of political compulsions, but selectively a selective core group. As I said, I named two ministers that I know who are very good on international issues, and both are former diplomats. Let's not forget. So they have the sort of what I would say grassroots diplomacy in their DNA.
Pradeep, you mentioned the disruptive potential of the Trump administration. One area, which also segues from our conversation, is global trade. How do you think the Trump administration will impact the current global trade framework?
It's very tragic, Anil. What I foresee is that there are two important factors which, in terms of the U.S. behavior under Trump, and by the way, supported by the Democrats, because they are equally protectionist. This is one area where there is a bipartisan support as far as the U.S. is concerned. They would rather like to see the WTO shut down, which was an outcome of the efforts that they made post-World War II, if you remember. One of the three Bretton Woods institutions was WTO, which came in late after the World Bank and IMF, but it did come. And even at that time, the US was a strong opposition to any international trade organization because they did not want their sovereignty to be challenged outside their borders. And the same thing is happening again. The jewel in the crown of the WTO, what is the dispute settlement system, has been lying defunct for long because the US has opposed the appointment of appellate body members. Even India very cleverly settled 6 disputes with the WTO, pulled them out of the WTO, and settle it across by bilateral consultations, which anyway they could have done. But that is not the point. The point is that India should not have done it. If we are a leader of the global south, and unfortunately we don't behave like a leader, we do many silly things, to be very honest, which have set even the G90 against us. So let's go back to the Trump's behavior is going to be very anti-multilateral system. Even not only trade, but even climate change.
But Pradeep, the relationship between India and US is not a very binary. Trade is not the only factor
Correct.
between the two. It's a very strong strategic relationship. So, particularly now in defense and the whole semiconductor deal to make some defense chips in India. So, where the Department of US Defense is going to guide the design and manufacture. So, how do you see this? There are it's not like one egg in the basket. There are two eggs in the basket. So how do the two sides weigh the strategic part and the trade part?
Anil, if you see governments anywhere, work in a siloed manner. And the same thing then impacts, many of these issues. Everybody is aware that, look, these are important issues. We have strategic partnership with India. We have interests against, keeping China out of the kind of, the trouble spot. And yet, and therefore, our defense cooperation is in fact strengthening. It is deepening. And we are now enjoying the best of privileges. What we do want is from the US is that we should be treated like a treaty ally, and though we are only a friend and we are not a treaty ally, then we should get the same privileges. And that is something which we are going to aim to continue to pursue. Now, how will that impact upon trade relationship? We don't know. And don't forget that even trade, Anil, in the US is dealt with by two departments. The USTR, the United States Trade Representative, and the Department of Commerce. Now, both of them do talk to each other, but yet they are two different agencies of the government. USTR is, of course, more involved with the treaty rules, the rules of trade, as against Department of Commerce, more about the brass tacks of trade. Whether we bring in any kind of non-tariff barrier against U.S. almonds or pistachio, and then they start breathing down our neck all the time, and we do that. We have done it in the past as well. I mean, when they stopped our mangoes, if you remember, Anil, so we took a retaliatory action against almonds, for example, or pistachio and so on. But now all this is a part of, yet it did not impact our defense relationship. What we must understand is that people understand that even siloed approaches can be constructive and not necessarily destructive. They look, okay, we are not agreeing here, but let's not disagree here. Let's continue with that conversation. So this happens.
Pradeep, they actually feel, as far as the Indian government is concerned, is domestic competitiveness. Okay, a lot of legacy deficits, whether it's logistics, cost of capital, etc., are beginning to get addressed, but there's still a way to go, particularly in ease of doing business at the state level. So, how do you see domestic competitiveness playing catch up? Because unless and until that happens, India's negotiating position will always be defensive on trade.
As I said, you hit the nail on the head, and we can improve our competitiveness if we take very granular measures. Ease of doing business, agreed. Secondly, Anil, in order to do all this, the other important thing is how can we work with all our states? Because there are many issues which have to be addressed by states and not by the center. Center can only address issues which are there under central laws. But the state laws or the state practices, for example, I'll give you an example. IDFC had done a study in 5 states of Land Acquisition Act, which is the central legislation. And you'll be surprised in all the 5 different states, practices were different. For the same law, you can have differences between one state and the other state in terms of application, political will, etc., etc., including, as you know, I mean, the paperweight factor, the grease factor, and so on. That also, ease of doing business is basically, it's a mindset issue.
Pradeep is right in so many ways. Trump 2.0 was always going to be unpredictable. Yes, the inclusion of Elon Musk in Trump's cabinet amplifies the X factor. Yet, at the same time, we should not forget that India's foreign policy is limited by domestic capabilities. Yes, we have come a long way in improving domestic competitiveness. However, we still have an even longer way to go forward before we bring us on par with what is the rest of the world. So till such time India gets onto this page, India's foreign policy will always be defensive in nature. Clearly, as Pradeep pointed out, India desperately needs a mindset reset, especially if it wants to get on to the global high table. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to StratNews Global on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And please do share your thoughts, ideas and suggestions with us. I'm available on Twitter at Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.